Good evening, everybody. Shri P.K. Taneja, President, Shri Mukesh Puri, GSFC Chair, the Honorable Provost, Director, members of the Board of Governors, Governing Council and the Academic Council. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here today. Thank you very much. You know, in convocations around the country, you either have the chief guest speaking before the degrees are awarded or after the degrees are awarded, and both have serious problems. Before the degree is awarded, everyone is texting कि degree नहीं दिया, पता नहीं कितने देर बात करेगा ये. After the degree is awarded, everyone wants to go and say पता नहीं कितना देर बात करेगा, कब खत्म होगा ये. And in the word of text messages, you know, this goes not just in the room, it goes all over the world. So I have to be careful and finish speedily. Fortunately, the introduction was very long and took up half my time, so I can finish quite fast. Now, you know, the problem in today's world is that everyone, all the speakers will tell you what are the major challenges in the world today and how you are all bright young people and you can take on any challenges, and how you will go ahead and do well. And that is very true. But there's also some practical problem. How is it that you're going to deal with that, deal with your careers, your family, and also manage to address these big problems? And of course, what will happen is that you will address your personal successes, and in doing so, you will also address larger problems and issues which the country and the world faces. How does that happen? Now, I hope there are no students here who are still doing their courses, because I'm going to tell you a little secret. And all of you have finished your courses, so you can know that secret. In class, there are three types of people. One is a very small number who, without making any effort, without appearing to try, they do brilliantly. Now, that's a very small number. Then there's a slightly larger number of students who work very hard and who do brilliantly. And then there's a very large number who are having fun. Now, typically, you know, the people who are having fun have a sense of guilt that what will happen to us because of these other two categories. And these other two categories have a sense of envy that, look, we are working so hard or we are focusing on our work, how come these people are having fun? Now, when you go ahead and look on later in life, you will find that everyone is actually doing well. Those who worked hard, those who are brilliant, and those who didn't work hard and were having fun. Why is that? That is because what happens in a university is not just the teaching and the learning and the courses. You make friends, and these friends are for life. The teaching and the learning and so on, you can pick up. You can do it in course, in class, if you are that kind of a bent of mind. You can do it without going to class. You can do it by talking to your other students in the chai shop, by studying. Everyone will manage in one way or the other. But what is core in a university education is the actual friendships which one makes. And sadly, the pandemic threw that for a toss in many ways because of the online nature. But young people are made of such stuff that even a short period of getting together makes lifelong friendship. People ask, you know, which hostel by you, which batch by you, which college by you, and those friendships are there. And you can call on those friendships anytime. And therefore, people in the last row who are, you know, not paying attention and having fun can serve a very important role, because they network, they know what the problems are, and they know the other two categories of people who can solve the problems. Whereas those who are, you know, able to solve the problems will not have that networking capacity to actually be in a position, given an opportunity to solve the problem. So this combination works. So we must, you know, give a big hand to all the students of all three categories. I must say that I'm in the last category because You're supposed to, when you give a convocation address, you're supposed to prepare the address, write it down, and give it to Mr. Panchal so he can print it out. I have only this right now. I have not prepared anything yet. So, my apologies. So, let me now go on to what the challenges in the world are. And the challenges in the world are actually pretty strong. And we need bright people of all kinds to work together to solve that. So I'll tell you just two parts. One, how we came about to this situation. And second, how we can go ahead and address that situation. What happened to us as humans on this planet is something quite interesting. About 10,000 years ago, we started domesticating plants and animals. And as we did that, humans did that by, clearing forests and having land for cultivation. And as they progressed, you needed fertilizers for soil. And these fertilizers, the natural soil quality started running off. People used other kinds of manure, for example, or bird droppings, guano as fertilizers, or nitrites, and even that started running out. And in the early 20th century, two Germans, Haber and Bosch, all the chemical engineers will know that, invented a process by which they could get nitrogen from the atmosphere and make ammonia. And this ammonia, through the Haber-Bosch process, was used to make fertilizer and also used to make other sort of terrible chemicals. But this fertilizer generation completely transformed the world and allowed agriculture to grow and livestock to grow consequently in an enormous manner, and thereby not having any limitation on the numbers of people the planet can hold, because agriculture seemed limitless in its growth. Today, half the nitrogen in each of our bodies comes from the Haber-Bosch process. So that was transformative. Another transformative thing which happened to the planet was the start of the Industrial Revolution over 200 years ago. Because of that Industrial Revolution, humans could take energy from the planet, minerals and materials from the planet, exploit a workforce anywhere, and make productive machines and other products which they could have a market. And this resulted in enormous growth, economic growth, industrial growth, the growth of imperialism, colonialism, and industrial empires. Now, one important feature of this, and all those of you who have done science and engineering will know this, is if you want to get order inside a system, if you want to lower entropy inside a system, then you must have disorder outside. You cannot get order free. You need energy to generate order, and that energy you get from outside the system. And therefore, the result of the Industrial Revolution is something like that. There was extraordinary progress and order in the industrialized countries, the colonialist countries, and increased poverty and disorder in other countries. And more importantly, from a general perspective, there was a ravaging of the planet. The ravaging of the planet also took place because products of high quality were available at low cost, not because they were intrinsically less expensive, but we forward traded the expense by damaging the environment and asked future generations to pay for the cost of damage to the environment. The result of this breakneck industrialization and this breakneck growth is the state we see the planet today. The consequences of global warming, climate change, environmental damage, all of them are serious. Now we are asked to save the planet, and rightly so. Now there are two ways to save the planet. One is we cut back on these ways by which we have reached this state, and that is what many countries, many industrialized countries in the West want us all to do. But there's a other side of the coin. How do we raise from poverty the hundreds of millions in South America, in Africa, in Asia, including India, yet not cause damage to the planet in the way others have done? This is the biggest challenge. The answer to that comes from a variety of ways. One is, of course, new and renewable energy, use of nuclear energy, but it also comes from science and technology, politics, economics, and collaborations. So going forward, these are the big challenges, no matter whether you have done management or engineering or science. We have to find ways by which we can have massive development in a sustainable manner, yet not cause further damage to the planet. How do we do this? There are two ways which the West needs to address, the developed world needs to address, and both are very contentious now. One is resource. To have sustainable development requires massive injection of funds. And there's a constant demand that it be injected. I'll take the example of Africa. There is a commitment by Western countries to give Africa substantial loans to develop in a sustainable manner. Now, one major African leader, a former vice president of Nigeria, wrote an article recently in which he pointed out that these loans are actually a minuscule amount. The amount is assessed on the basis of how do we provide electricity, water, basic roads to major countries in Africa. He says that if this is the essential definition of what development is going to be, you are not addressing the aspiration of people in Africa. Why shouldn't an African child in the Congo not aspire to be an astronomer or a data scientist or a computer scientist? Why should the basic requirement for an African child, for example, be only good health and good schooling? What about college? What about having airports in Africa or roads in Africa and servers in Africa and highways? All of that costs much more. And therefore, the kind of approach and attitude should not just be that a minimalistic development is needed and therefore nothing more is needed to save the planet, but how does one have a higher level of development but yet have an energy use which is reasonable and correct and sustainable. This is a big challenge and that needs to be done. This is a problem in Africa, in India, in large parts of Asia, Latin America, and so on and so forth. So resources are one. The second is technology. The entire approach to technology during this period of massive industrial growth has been to not use patents as a tool for innovation and development, but use patents as a way, intellectual property as a way, to corral and ring fence new developments in a manner where there's constant greening of patents in a manner where others cannot access it. So patents effectively by big industrial companies don't expire for really big products. This, again, is a major, especially for areas of science and technology, which address mitigation and adaptation in climate change, is a serious problem. So intellectual property has to be opened up in a manner where there's a moratorium, at least on certain kinds of intellectual property, being not being restricted and being more freely available. If these happen, then we are opening the doors for sustainable development in the context of climate change. There, what can India do? Now, many scholars, many analysts say that we are, not as advanced as America and Europe in science and technology. China has invested enormously, and there's, we have a large population to lift from poverty, so we are in a very difficult situation. Now, that is, at best you can say that's a glass half full approach, and I am far, far more optimistic. And the reason for that is simple. There are two reasons, actually. First, the way technology has changed in the last 2 or 3 decades is that they're going to be more and more cyber-physical. In fact, even the electronics technology is anchored substantially on design, while the manufacturing of chips and so on is a very important concept, but the design of chips is equally, if not far more important. And everything which we do will have a cyber-physical context. Therefore, there's a potential for bright, young, intelligent people who have a deep domain understanding, whether it's chemical engineering or mathematics or computer science or management, combined with the ability to use the tools of computer science and artificial intelligence. For them, they can leapfrog into being leadership positions anywhere in the world. And indeed, many of the top companies in these kinds of areas have research and development labs in India now. and abroad, and many of them are, have students, former students from India being employed and going at high levels. So this being applied on a large scale to India is certainly feasible. So if combined with the investment we're seeing in India on infrastructure, we use these tools to address problems in India as well as the rest of the world, then the world is your oyster and you can do whatever you want. So these are very feasible approaches. Therefore, the problems are enormous, but a large young population can actually dynamically work to address these problems. The rapid change of the kinds of areas of research which is happening all over the world and the new developments coming in mean that we will have to rely more and more on new understanding which you all should get, as well as new strengths. There are views about, for example, ChatGPT, that it will take over the roles of, say, for example, middle management. Now, ChatGPT at the current stage, and it will keep improving, will give you boilerplate decent answers to many of the kinds of queries you pose. Boilerplate decent solutions to many of the programming requests you make. But if you use that, stand on other tools to become far more adept, then you can go a long way. So I'd like to stop here. Thank you very, very much for having me here. It's a great pleasure.